The person bagging your groceries at Publix might retire richer than your doctor, and I'm not even kidding. There are baggers, cashiers, and stock clerks at this one grocery chain who've walked away as multimillionaires, some with over $5 million, without ever getting a fancy title. And behind it all is one Georgia family worth $11 billion, who built a $60 billion empire during the Great Depression, and then did something no billionaire is ever supposed to do. They gave most of it away to their own workers. Here's why. Chapter 1. The grocery store that makes baggers rich. Let me start with the fact that genuinely breaks people's brains, because once you hear it, you'll never look at a grocery store the same way again. If you've ever shopped at a Publix in the Southeast, you've probably noticed the place just feels different. An employee actually walks you to the exact aisle you're looking for instead of vaguely pointing. A bagger carries your groceries to your car and won't take a tip. The deli makes sandwiches so beloved they have a cult following and their own nickname, the Pub Sub, that people genuinely get emotional about. It feels like everyone who works there actually cares. And here's the twist. That's because they're not just employees, they're owners. Every single one of them. Now here's where it gets wild. Because they own the company, the wealth that builds up over a career is staggering. We're talking about a store manager who started as a teenage bagger and retired with over $5 million in company stock. A produce manager, a guy stacking apples, who took a $3,500 wedding gift, plowed it into shares, and 30 years later was sitting on more than $10 million. And these aren't even the executives. There are regular stock clerks and produce workers who never got promoted to management at all, who just showed up, did their job for 40 years, and crossed the finish line as multimillionaires. The company itself basically shrugs and admits it. Yeah, it's not unusual to hear about someone retiring from Publix a millionaire. So how on earth does a grocery store, an industry where profit margins are a razor-thin 1.6%, where companies go bankrupt constantly, turn its baggers into millionaires? And the mechanics are almost sneakily simple. Publix automatically hands every eligible employee stock worth around 8.5% of their salary every year, at zero cost to them, just for working there. So picture someone making 50 grand a year, quietly getting over $4,000 in free stock annually, on top of being able to buy more, and that stock historically climbing more than 16% a year on average. Run that compounding machine for 30 years, and a regular grocery worker crosses $1 million without ever doing anything fancy. So the real question is, why would the family that owns it choose to share that fortune instead of hoarding it like every other dynasty on Earth? To understand that, you have to go back to a 22-year-old kid, the Great Depression, and a grudge. Chapter 2. The kid with $1,300 and a chip on his shoulder. Picture the worst possible moment in American history to open a business. The stock market has just crashed. Banks are failing. A quarter of the country is about to be out of work. This is 1930. And this is exactly when a 22-year-old from Georgia named George Jenkins decided to bet everything he had on a grocery store. And when I say everything, I mean it. His entire life savings was $1,300. That's it. To put that in perspective, that's barely a month's rent in modern Florida. He took that money and on September 6, 1930, opened the very first Publix in Winter Haven, Florida, in an old former movie theater building. Fun little detail, the name Publix wasn't even his idea originally. He borrowed it from a chain of movie theaters he admired, and when those theaters went bankrupt during the Depression, he just took the name, classic. But here's what actually lit the fire under George Jenkins, and it's the grudge that built an empire. Before this, he'd worked as a manager at a grocery chain called Piggly Wiggly, and he was full of ideas. Better ways to treat customers, better ways to run a store, better ways to treat the workers. And his bosses? They shut him down every single time. They saw no reason to change anything. They dismissed him. So George walked away with a vow burning in his chest. His company would be different. His workers would never feel powerless and ignored the way he had. And he backed that vow up immediately with a move that, in 1930, was borderline insane. From the very beginning, he started giving his employees ownership. Each worker got a $2 a week raise, but instead of cash, it was automatically used to buy them company stock. Right from day one, in the middle of the Great Depression, the bag boys were becoming shareholders. Everyone who worked at Publix would own a piece of Publix. And that one radical idea is the seed of the entire $11 billion fortune. But to turn a single store into an empire, George needed to build something nobody had ever seen. And he was about to mortgage his own orange grove to do it. Speaking of putting your money into something that quietly pays you back day after day, that's what pulled someone on our team to the Pulse R8 Smart Ring. It tracks your heart rate, your sleep, and your workout straight from your finger. A week on a single charge, 100 days with the case, and it's fully waterproof. The part that got us was the price. Under $40, a fraction of what the big-name rings cost, because it comes direct instead of through the retailers that mark everything up. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera, or tap the first link in the description. Because his next move, mortgaging the orange grove for a food palace nobody had imagined, built the empire. Chapter 3: The Food Palace that invented the modern supermarket. By 1940, George Jenkins had a vision in his head that was, frankly, a little crazy for the time. He didn't want to run a dingy little corner grocery. He wanted to build what he literally called a food palace. And to fund it, he did something that takes real guts. He mortgaged his own orange grove for $25,000 to bankroll it. And what he opened on November 8, 1940, genuinely changed grocery shopping forever. Stuff we now think is completely normal? A lot of it was revolutionary, even invented, right here. Air conditioning. In Florida, in 1940, walking from brutal heat into a cool store felt like magic. Automatic doors that opened with an electric eye, so your arms full of groceries didn't matter. Fluorescent lighting. Wide aisles you could actually move through. Frozen food cases. Open-air dairy displays. Even music piped in through the store. He'd traveled all over the country on what he called idea-seeking trips, stealing the best concepts he saw and cramming them all into one place. People had genuinely never experienced shopping like this. It wasn't a chore anymore. It was an event. And the man was relentless about innovation. When shopping centers became a thing in the 1950s, other grocers were too scared of the high rents to get involved. George dove in head first. When he couldn't find a developer willing to build a shopping center where he wanted one, he just built his own. When barcode scanning technology was brand new, Publix was one of the first chains in the entire country to roll it out, leaving competitors years behind. He bought out a 19-store rival chain in 1945 to fuel his expansion, moved his headquarters to Lakeland, Florida, where it still sits today, 74 years later, and just kept building. But here's the thing that makes George Jenkins different from every other empire builder we've covered. As the company exploded in value, he never wavered on the original promise. And that promise is the exact reason Wall Street has been locked out of this company for nearly a century. Chapter 4: The company Wall Street literally cannot buy. Okay, this is the heart of the whole story, and it's genuinely one of the most rebellious things in American business. Publix is one of the largest companies in the country, $60+ billion in revenue. And you, me, hedge funds, Warren Buffett, nobody on the outside can buy a single share of it. It's impossible. And that's completely on purpose. Here's how it works. Publix is the largest employee-owned company in the entire United States. The stock is not on the New York Stock Exchange. It has no ticker symbol you can punch into an app. The only people on planet Earth who are allowed to own Publix stock are its active employees and its board members. That's it. That's the whole list. The current and former workers own about 80% of the entire company, and the founding Jenkins family holds the remaining 20%. So when a cashier gets stock, they're not buying into some abstract Wall Street casino. They own a real, direct piece of the company they clock into every morning. And here's why that's not just a feel-good story. It's a genuine superpower. Think about what every public company deals with. The brutal, relentless pressure of Wall Street demanding bigger profits every 3 months. That quarterly pressure is what forces companies to lay off workers, cut corners, and make short-sighted decisions just to make the numbers look good for analysts. Publix is completely immune to all of it. Because there are no outside shareholders to please, management can think in decades instead of quarters. They can sacrifice a little profit today to take care of their people and build something that lasts 100 years. No activist investors, no hostile takeovers, no Wall Street suits demanding they fire people to boost the stock. The Jenkins family essentially built a fortress, and they handed the keys to their own employees. Which brings us to the most jaw-dropping promise this company has ever kept, a promise that should have been impossible. Chapter 5. 95 years, 0 layoffs, even when it made no sense. Here's a record that business school professors will tell you is literally impossible. In 95 years of operation, Publix has never, not once, conducted a single economic layoff, ever. Let that sink in, because of what this company has lived through. They started during the Great Depression, when 1 in 4 Americans couldn't find work. They survived World War II, the brutal recession of 2001, the 2008 financial crisis that gutted the entire economy, the 2020 pandemic that collapsed retail employment overnight. Through every single one of those catastrophes, when virtually every other major company in America was slashing jobs to survive, Publix never laid people off for financial reasons. Now, to be clear, they'll absolutely fire you for doing your job badly or breaking the rules. But they made a sacred promise that no associate would ever lose their job just because the economy tanked through no fault of their own. George Jenkins believed workers shouldn't be punished for economic disasters they didn't cause and couldn't control, and every CEO since has treated that promise as untouchable. But here's the part that flips the whole story on its head, because it proves this isn't charity, it's strategy. Look at what Publix did during the 2008 financial crisis, the absolute worst moment. While every competitor was panicking, firing thousands of workers and begging for survival, Publix went on the attack. They spent $500 million to buy 49 stores from a struggling rival, the biggest acquisition in their history, snapping up real estate for cheap precisely because everyone else was too scared to move. And in that same brutal quarter, while competitors were collapsing, Publix's earnings grew by 8%. They got stronger during the disaster that was crushing everyone else. And the research backs up why. Employee-owned companies went bankrupt at half the rate of normal companies during 2008, and during COVID, they were over 3 times more likely to keep their staff employed. Turns out, when your workers are owners, the whole machine just performs better when it matters most. And nowhere is that loyalty more visible than in who ends up running the entire company. Chapter 6. Every CEO started by bagging your groceries. Here's a detail so good it almost sounds made up. Every single CEO in Publix's history, every one of them, started their career as a front service clerk. You know, the teenager who bags your groceries and rolls your cart to the car. That's who ends up running this $60 billion empire. This isn't a cute coincidence. It's the entire philosophy. Publix fills around 90% of its management positions with people from inside the company. So the message to every nervous 16-year-old starting their first shift bagging groceries is crystal clear. The person at the very top of this whole thing once stood exactly where you're standing. Take the recent CEOs. Todd Jones started bagging groceries in 1980 in New Smyrna Beach and climbed every single rung over 36 years to become CEO in 2016, the first chief executive in company history with no blood relation to the Jenkins family at all. The current CEO, Kevin Murphy, started as a bagger in 1984 in Margate, Florida, and spent 40 years working his way up. These guys didn't parachute in from some Ivy League boardroom. They lived the job. They know what it's like to chase carts in a parking lot in the Florida heat. And think about what that does to a company. Your leaders have personally worked every position. They know exactly what the people on the floor are dealing with because they were those people. There's no clueless executive making decisions from an ivory tower who's never touched a register. It's the ultimate proof that the ownership promise is real. Work hard here, and there is genuinely no ceiling. You could be running the entire thing one day. But of course, this whole system rests on the one thing most billionaire families refuse to do, and the Jenkins family did it on purpose. Chapter 7. The family that gave away the kingdom. Here's what makes the Jenkins family so different from basically every dynasty in history. Most wealthy families do everything in their power to hoard control. They cling to majority ownership. They pass the crown to their kids. They'd rather burn the company down than let outsiders run it. The Jenkins family did the opposite. They deliberately gave up control. They kept just 20% of the company. They let their own employees own the other 80. And when it came time to run the business, they didn't force a Jenkins heir onto the throne. They handed operational control to professional managers who'd risen up from the sales floor. That's an astonishing thing for a founding family to do voluntarily. It means they valued the long-term health of the company over their own dynastic power and ego. Take Carol Jenkins Barnett, the founder's daughter. She served on the board for decades and led Publix's charitable arm, giving away over $25 million a year to housing, food assistance, and education. The family channeled their energy into giving, not gripping. And here's the beautiful irony. By giving away most of the company, they ended up incredibly wealthy anyway. That 20% stake they kept? It's worth around $11 billion today, making them one of the richest families in America. The founder, George Jenkins. Mr. George, as everyone called him, visited his stores personally right up until the week he died in 1996, still walking the floors, still talking to his associates, still living the principles he set down in 1930. He proved something that conventional business wisdom says is impossible, that you can pay your people more, share the ownership, never lay anyone off, charge premium prices, and dominate your entire market. But that very success now faces a test George Jenkins never could have imagined. Chapter 8. Can the fortress survive the future? So the model is basically perfect, right? 95 years of profit, an army of employee millionaires, total dominance. In South Florida, Publix holds over 60% of the grocery market, more than all its competitors combined, even while charging prices 60 to 70% higher than Walmart and Aldi. People happily pay way more because the experience and loyalty are that strong. So what could possibly go wrong? Well, a few things, and it's worth being honest about them. First, the cracks under pressure. The company's spotless reputation took a real hit during COVID. Publix was actually slower than its competitors to protect workers. Early on, it reportedly banned deli employees from wearing masks at all, apparently worried about scaring customers. Tragically, a 70-year-old deli worker in Miami Beach who wanted to wear a mask but was told he couldn't, later died, and his family sued, arguing the company chose its image over its people. For a company built on treating workers like family, that was a brutal contradiction. And there are quieter criticisms too. That starting wages are surprisingly low given all the wealth at the top, and that some workers feel pushed out through cut hours rather than honest layoffs, which conveniently protects that perfect no-layoff record. Then there's the future itself. Aldi and Lidl, the hardcore discount chains, are expanding aggressively across the Southeast, and younger shoppers often care way more about price than about a friendly bagger. And the biggest vulnerability of all? E-commerce. Publix's entire superpower is that magical in-store experience, the helpful employee owners, the pub subs, the human touch. But when shopping moves to an app and a delivery driver, all of that advantage just vanishes. An algorithm doesn't care that the warehouse worker owns stock. So the real question hanging over this empire is whether the most human company in American retail can survive in an increasingly inhuman click-and-deliver world. But here's the thought I'll leave you with, because whatever happens next, what George Jenkins built is genuinely staggering. A 22-year-old with $1,300, in the worst economy in American history, decided to do the exact opposite of what every business textbook preaches. He shared the wealth instead of hoarding it. He protected his people instead of discarding them. He locked Wall Street out and let his own baggers in. And 95 years later, that naive idea built a $60 billion fortress, made an $11 billion family, and created thousands of millionaires out of people the rest of corporate America treats as disposable. The family Wall Street can't touch didn't get rich by playing the game everyone else plays. They got rich by refusing to. If stories about the families and empires that built their fortunes by breaking all the rules are what brought you here, subscribe to Global Status, and we'll keep delivering them. See you in the next one.